Right, so hello and welcome back to Books and Things, and welcome to another video. And today I'm going to be carrying on with my 5 Victorian novels about series, and today I have for you 5 Victorian novels about industrialisation. So industrialisation is one of my favourite themes in Victorian literature. How society and the economy was changing over the Victorian period. I find it really interesting to explore Victorian novels that look at industrialisation and the kind of industrial north, especially during the 19th century and how it was changing. So the first one I want to recommend to you, which is like the staple of all of my industrialisation recommendations, is North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell. This incredible novel tells the story of a woman called Margaret Hale who moves from the rural south where she's grown up to the industrial north with her parents to a mill town called Milton, which is a loosely disguised Manchester, where she makes connections with various people, including workers inside cotton mills and also an owner of a cotton mill called Mr. Thornton. And we kind of follow the dynamics between all of them, the kind of ongoing conflicts between the masters and the workers, and also there is a strike in this book, and the way that is explored is absolutely fantastic. This book is my second favourite novel of all time after Charles Dickens' Our Mutual Friend. I love it a lot. It has my favourite love story in any book ever, but aside from that, it also has fantastic exploration of industrialisation, and the way this book looks at the question of industrialisation and sort of workers' rights from two very different sides is really fantastic. I would absolutely recommend this if you're interested in industrialisation. I do actually have another Gaskell novel on this list as well, because Elizabeth Gaskell just writes wonderfully about industrialisation, and that is her novel Mary Barton. This novel focuses entirely on workers in industrial Manchester. We follow a young woman called Mary Barton whose father is a mill worker, and what happens when Mary Barton is kind of torn between two very different men, one of whom is from her own class and one of whom is from a class above hers. And then like halfway through this book something incredibly dramatic happens which changes the whole course of the novel. It is fantastic and wonderful in so many ways, and it also really wonderfully explores industrialisation. Again, like North and South, it really interestingly explores industrial unrest and the kind of very different positions that various people take up. It's a fantastic novel, really powerful, and one I'd absolutely recommend. Another novel I would highly recommend if you're interested in industrialisation is Hard Times by Charles Dickens. This is set in the industrial town of Coketown, which is based on Preston, and it follows this industrial town and various characters who live within it, specifically a man called Mr. Gradgrind. But what this book looks at, which is really fascinating, more than industrialisation itself, is the kind of industrialisation of society and the industrialisation of the mind. The idea that it's not just work that is becoming more mechanical, but everything is becoming more mechanical. Our main character, Mr. Gradgrind, believes only in facts. He raises his children with no access to like stories and fairy tales because he thinks they should only learn facts because only facts are important. And the way this book looks at kind of how industrialisation might affect the way people think is really fascinating, and just, yeah, it's an incredible read. Another industrial novel I'd like to recommend is Shirley by Charlotte Bronte. Now you might be a little bit surprised to find one of the Brontes writing an industrial novel, but Shirley does in many ways really interestingly look at increased mechanisation in industry. Our central character Caroline is in love with a man called Robert Moore, who is a mill owner, and his increased mechanisation is causing great unrest amongst his workers, who near the beginning of the book break into the mill to break some of his machinery. And a lot of the book looks at industrial unrest and opposition to increased mechanisation of the workforce. There are so many other things going on in Shirley, including 2 fantastic female characters and a really interesting friendship between them, but the way this looks at industrialisation, especially industrialisation on a slightly smaller scale in a slightly smaller setting, is really fantastic, and I would highly recommend it. And the last one I would like to recommend is Sybil by Benjamin Disraeli. This is a really interesting novel. Its full title is Sybil or the Two Nations, and the two nations of England, according to Benjamin Disraeli in this book, are the rich and the poor. The idea is that the gap between the rich and the poor, between the upper classes and the working classes, is growing and a lot of the book is dealing with the kind of plight of the working classes, the difficulties that many people are finding themselves in the 19th century, especially in the 1840s when this was written, when there were a lot of problems with food shortages, and there's a lot of fantastic material in here. I really enjoyed this. I think Benjamin Disraeli partly I think because he was a politician as well, and that's what he's mostly known for. I think sometimes I come across the assumption that his novels aren't actually very good, but I really enjoyed Sybil. I thought it was really good fun, and I want to read more by him in the future. Sybil has a really interesting love story going through it as well. There is a little bit of idealisation of the female love interest, but I would say that the exploration of kind of working class difficulties and of class in general beneath that is really, really fantastic and really fascinating, especially the way it kind of ties into industrialisation and how class is kind of changing during the Victorian period. So yeah, those are 5 books which I really wanted to recommend to you, which all look really interestingly at industrialisation in the Victorian period. Please let me know if you've read any of these and if you find them interesting, and also if you have any other interesting Victorian industrial novels to recommend me. I really love reading about industrialisation, so please do send your recommendations my way. And that is all for now. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll be back very soon with another bookish video.